Right, so as I said, we're going to be looking at an amber-like stone for this one. So we're going to use something to create a central piece, then we're going to build some decoration up around it, and then we're going to look at creating the sort of glowy amber feel. And amber obviously is a very particular stone because it's fossilised resin, which I'm sure you know, and you can sometimes find fossilised millions-old insects and things trapped inside it. I've never yet successfully grown a dinosaur, but, you know, give us time. But it's a very soft stone compared to other gemstones, and it often has a lot of cracks and imperfections in it because it's usually full of bits of debris from trees and things that are millennium old. So we're going to try and get this crackle effect to work on our drawing. So I'm going to use a pencil first of all just to establish my circle. And then I've got this circle around. Looking at it, I think this might be too small now that I'm thinking, but I think I'm going to go for a little bit bigger than this. This one is 4 centimetres, so I'm going to go for something a little bit larger because I think I want a nice dramatic sort of centrepiece for that. So I've got a plastic cup here, exciting accoutrements, and so the bottom of my cup is slightly bigger. It's about 5 centimetres, so I'm going to draw around that, I think, to do my amber stone. So it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. The good thing about amber is that it often isn't a perfect circle. You can apparently find it on the beaches in Kent round here where we are. I have looked and looked and have yet to find one, but my dream is to find one. I also teach jewellery making, and I have had a couple of students come in, and one of them came in with a great big piece of amber that she found in the Margate. And apparently, if you want to go and look, the key is to look for piles of seaweed, because amber is much lighter than other gemstones. It gets caught in the seaweed like sort of mermaids' purses and things like that. So apparently that's where you want to look, is big banks of seaweed, if you want to go there. Right, so I've drawn my circle around here, and I'm going to go round it in pen so it's nice and defined so everyone can see it. So I'm just following the line that I've drawn. If you're feeling brave, you can go straight into drawing in pen to begin with, but then I tend to find if you're drawing round something like a cup, you always go off a bit and do it in sections, and the line isn't brilliant. It's not the most brilliant line as it is anyway, but that's given us our circle, so we can start. That's going to be our stone. I'm going to put a border around that, so we've got so I'm going to go round again, but like try and do a few millimetres away from that to create a lip, because most of these stones are going to be in a setting. I'm in two minds. I never know whether it's best to try and do this in one go or try and do it in sections. I'm doing it in sections because it's really hard, because I'm working with a camera sitting in front of me. It really does get in the way of this kind of thing, but it's not the most perfectly even border. But luckily, you know, we're not here for like geometric perfection. If you'd got a sort of whole drawer that weren't big enough, or a pair of compasses, you could do them in perfect symmetrical harmony. But we don't, and we're not doing that. So now I'm going to put a row of like beading round it. So I'm going to do small circles, roughly the same size as the border, or same width as the border that I've put round. And again, what's good about this is we can kind of, if we get all the way around and find that we're slightly off size, it's not going to matter. We'll be able to squeak one in or slightly expand the last one to kind of fill in the gap. I'm going to do them all roughly the same sort of size. Of course, you could quite easily change the size as they go round, which would be quite nice to sort of vary them, going up, going big and going small again. If you're going to change your size, I would probably try doing them in a kind of progression order. So you go sort of up, all the way up as it were, then all the way down again. I think if you do alternate big and small circles, it's going to look a bit daisy-ish, and that's going to look less satisfying. This is the most sort of regimented bit we're going to do, so I just want to get all this in. It's the least dynamic part of the composition, but it's a good warm-up, isn't it? It's getting the hand back to work, and the small row of circles is quite satisfying to get round. And hopefully my hand's not masking too much, but we're getting round. I'm going to do from the top here. Now I'm completely covering it there, so I'm going to have to come round up here. There is apparently in, I think it's the palace, the Tsar's palace in St. Petersburg. Why can I not say Petersburg? That's better. St. Petersburg. There is an incredible Russian palace there, and they have an entire room that is clad in amber, so they've got amber big enough to cut sheets that have veneered the walls and the floor and the ceiling, and everything in it is made of amber. And I must say, probably not at the moment is the best time to pay a visit to Russia, what with everything going on in Europe, but I would love to go and see that. That's definitely my bucket list. I'm just going to squeak in the last one then. They're slightly smaller, but I think the world will forgive us, and we've got all the way round to do that. And this is a really satisfying way of doing edging. And then of course, if you wanted to, you could go on and expand each one of these into a more complicated pattern, because you've got a nice basis to work on. All I'm going to do this time is to do like another border line that's going round it, but instead of being just a round, I'm going to slightly follow the indentations and the dips that the circles give me. So it's sort of like a wobbly line. So I'm just echoing the shape of each one as I go round, which just gives it a little bit of extra weight and thickness. You could do this in a thick black pen and sort of give it a heavy black outline. That would also work, just to add some more definition and boldness to it. That would be fine too. So let's work our way round. But it's just like doing lots of little bumps really, but just use the circles that you've drawn as the guide for your outline. So if you have done circles that go bigger and smaller, then your outline should be following those as well. Just try not to block that bit. And here we go round. Whoops. Well, you know, it's nearly accurate. It's harder doing it up in the air. That's my excuse. Right, so I've got my wobbly kind of background going off there. So that's the sort of the setting that stone that we're going to put the stone into. So now I want to add a bit of sort of curlicues and something exciting going on round the piece, so that we've I'm not just doing a standard kind of, this is a drawing of a ring kind of replica. So I'm going to start off by doing some spines, and these are going to be lines that I'm going to build pattern off. So we'll start with one underneath and have it curling out in that sort of direction. I'm going to do sort of 3 here, so I'm going to have one there and then one curling round up into there, and then there's going to be another one coming out from around about here, something like that. Sorry, it's very difficult at the moment. My camera stand is slightly broken, so it's very sensitive to being touched. It's sort of, so every time I go near it, it's sort of wiggling and giggling at me. And then I'm going to do maybe some sort of half big flower shapes. So I think we'll get some of those in. So what we've got to imagine that these kind of flowers are slightly tucked behind. I think if I just raise that up, if it will let me without getting too upset, I think we're okay. You can see the top of it a bit better. So I'm going to start just with like a single rainbow line, just a hoop coming out. So that's going to be the centre of a kind of flower shape, but that's obviously going to be tucked in behind the piece, so we'll get some nice layering. So I'm going to make that again, follow that again, so I've got a double line kind of coming up, and there's going to be more to this, but we're going to jump back between the sort of areas, and so we can build things up in as we go. And then we want to have something happening up here, so I think maybe a couple of like curlicues, sort of like those sort of shapes, a bit like the speech mark kind of shape. So they come up and they're going to curl round like that, and we'll come back and add some more to them like that. So there's sort of like there's one of those sort of curly shapes, and then another one coming up and round there. So that's going to overlap any petals that happen on this one, I think. And then we'll put another line or two, maybe just to mark out like a sort of vein for maybe a sort of leaf shape or something. So I'm going to do a curly line going in there and make that a little bit thicker. So that's coming around there. So that's sort of like a place that we can start from. So we've got some things to kind of build some shapes onto. So let's come back down to this one here. I'm going to make that central spine there. I'm going to make that a bit thicker if I can grab, this is where all my brush pens are hiding from. I was going to grab a brush pen. If I haven't, I'll just do it double and draw it again a bit more thickly. Come here, brush pens. Here we go. What's this one? Yes, here we go, brush pen. Right, so I'm going to just make this thicker and, make this thicker and darker so that it's a bit more dramatic. And I'm going to use a brush pen just to fill it. And if you haven't got one, you can do it double and then sort of fill it in. Or you can just use the thickest pen that you've got, just so we make that nice and bold. And we're going to do some shapes coming off this, very simple, but we're going to build on them a bit more, add some more complexity as we go. So I'm just going to do like sort of long tongue shapes, I suppose, sort of like, I suppose you'd call them something like that, but sort of long shapes that do that, like long U shapes, long upside down U shapes. But they're going to form kind of like fronds, as if this was something like a bit like a fern leaf or something, having that kind of feeling. They're sort of like the teardrop shapes, but they join with a sort of flatter bottom, as they were. They're not coming to so much of a point. But I'm just going to bring those all the way along, and then take them all the way back down again. And as they come towards the end, you want to make them a little bit bigger, and then taper them off. So the middle ones are kind of the biggest, and then when you get to the end, you've got a little slightly smaller end. And I'm going to come from this side, so I'm going to, let me just move around so I can, so I want to kind of mirror the ones on this side, but not completely. They shouldn't be, you shouldn't be identical. I think these ones are going to work better if they're slightly pointing down that way. So you can kind of have them in pairs, but also not necessarily doing the same thing. And they come round. There we go. And I'm just going to move up to the end there. And that's got quite a nice fern-like kind of feel, like a bit of foliage. And then I'm going to do another one of the outlines just around, just to double up some of these as they come up. So again, just sort of following that shape again over the top. And this kind of echoing line always helps to add emphasis, and it sort of gives you just more space that you can decorate or come back to. Later on you might want to come back and add colour onto this, or add black shading, but for now just keep it light and we'll work on it later. And come round to this side. I'm going to do the same sort of pattern on the other ones as well. So just bring that line round. And of course, when we do these ones, they've got to think about where things are layering and how they're fitting together. So if I start on this side here, I can let them grow up and kind of infill that space. So I've got a nice space kind of all the way around this, between this and the gemstone here, so they can sort of reach up and fill that in, and I can get some nice overlapping happening. Like that, bringing them round. And then I'm going to get a couple on the end. And then I'm going to go a little bit smaller. And then this side I can bring them in again. Just, again, sort of following, but you can see how they're kind of growing the same way, but curving round to kind of match, not really match, but work in rhythm with this sort of section as well. And when they get here, they're going to disappear underneath because this one's slightly underneath. And again, we can do an outline. Let's try doing a black outline on this one so you can see what it would look like, because that might be an option. So again, I'm just going to use the tip of the brush pen and then just come round and make these shapes a little bit heavier. Like that. And with the brush pen, you can kind of go thick around the round and then let it fade out, so that you're just kind of going around the tops of those shapes. So you do a fatter bit and then let it trail out. This is a little bit of an old brush pen. It's getting slightly fuzzy, but it's quite a nice effect just to get that little hint of thickness in sort of shadow like that. We'll come back to do some more of that, but we'll get the other one mapped in first, and then we'll go look at the flowers on the side. So again, this is going to be the same sort of thing. So with this one, yeah, I think maybe we'll look at this flower next. So I want this one to be underneath a bit. So let's look and see at the shape that we've got here. So we'll put some petal shapes in around this one. So what I'm going to do is the first one, this one's going to be on top, as it were. So I'm going to do like a heart, it's sort of like a heart shape, but its point is as if it's disappeared into that circle. So it's like you can see the way that then gives it that feeling of a petal growing out. And then I'm going to I'm going to do more going round, but they're all going to slightly be underlapping, so they can start closer together, and then you'll just sort of tuck them in underneath each other like that. That's it, round there and into there, and there's that sort of flower shape in there. And then I think I want to get another one, like a smaller one in here. So it's going to be behind this one. So we'll do, again, this is the centre. So we do the centre tucked underneath and then the outline. And then again, we'll do one petal sort of on top like that, and then a few more. And they're all slightly tucking under each other. If you end up doing one completely revealed, that's not a problem, but it's just kind of nice to have those layers going on. So we can bring that in. Right, so now, I'll just see one there. So now I've got those two kind of mapped in. I can now get this frond in, because I want to tuck it underneath the flower there. So it just makes sure that we know where we're going. So we can come back to here. I'm going to do our bumps kind of coming round. With this one, I think I'm going to start with the end one, so that I know that's definitely going to fit and tuck in underneath that flower. And so we'll bring, so with some of these, you're only going to see, some of them are disappearing underneath, some of them you're going to see them sort of curling through into that space. There's going to be lots of overlapping. That's it, and maybe see the bottom coming through with some of them. But any of these shapes sort of working together and round. There we go, that's those ones fitting in there. And then we'll do the ones coming underneath. So they're kind of curling up in that direction, but they might come round a bit more. And they can always expand out into that space before they come a bit smaller. So there we go. So now I've got those sort of fronds in. I think I'm going to do the black margin a bit heavier on the other two, so they've got a similar kind of feel to these ones. And again, my fuzzy brush pen, just so it's a bit heavier, and the same on this one. There we go. Right, and so we've got the two flowers, got daisies in. Let's put maybe a little bit of something more happening over here. Let's have a look and see what we've got. Well, we've got some of these teardrop shapes. So you can make these sort of, give them a bit more weight. If you see oh, my hand's right in front of that, that's no good. Let me come around this way, that's better. So there's my curl kind of in here. So I can bring that point round and then bring another curl kind of coming in here, and it kind of gives it like a more solid shape, makes it look more like a sort of comma. So I'll do that again on here. So it's just put another curl in. So we've got like a sort of, I always think they look a bit like sort of droopy dinosaur heads. I know it's a weird thing to think about, but there we go. And I'm going to put another one, so to construct one off here, I'm going to do a big long curl first of all. So I'll do it and draw it and then move my hand away so you can definitely see it. But so I've got a big long curl sitting like that, and then I'm going to give it a thin neck kind of coming back round from there. So imagine it sort of like an elongated comma. So it's just putting that line in like that. I'm going to do another one that's kind of going to cross behind it and kind of go the other way. So I'm going to do a curl going out this way, and again just remember that trick of pen on the paper, draw it towards the point, then just lift up and put it down again and continue your line round, and then you've got a nice feeling of overlapping starting to happen. And then I can bring that thin line back in the same way, so, and bring it round and then just bring it down into that one as well. So you've got some sort of overlapping sort of, I don't know what they are, stamen or some kind of thing like that. And I think we'll do one, maybe a little one coming this way as well. So bring it up and round into the curl and then bring that line down. So you've got like a nice sort of waving about thing. And if you want to be really clever, you can try putting a couple more in behind there where you've got more overlapping. So if you started one from around here, maybe you could bring it up, lift the pen up and down, put it down again, and then it's definitely tucked behind all the other ones like that, and it'll give us some scope to do some nice sort of dark shading in there. So we've got this line up here, so I think that's going to turn into a different kind of leaf. So I'm going to put like a big sort of shape round. So coming from that point, I'm going to bring an edge down, and it's going to sort of do an impossible bit of overlapping there behind that flower, but you know, why not? And then bring that one down behind here. So we've got that sort of long sword leaf kind of shape. I'll just see if I can get this to raise up a tiny bit. That's a bit better, I think. Too wonky. Straighten up. I don't know if it's going to straighten up. That's a bit better. A little bit better. Or maybe I'll hold it. I'll have to hold on to it and do it one hand. That might work better. Right. So then up here, I'm going to put one of these curly shapes that we've been doing, these sort of commas. I'm going to put one in, start it up round here, bring it round, and then it's going to form the outline of that side of the leaf. Okay. So we've got the curly bit up there, and then that's just taking its neck down. You might find it easy to do it the other way, draw up, and then around that way. So you've got that sort of feel. And then I'm going to take the other side, as it were. I'm going to take it down this leaf here. So I'm going to bring it round and then continue it down around that outline. So that's given us a kind of thick outline there. And we could put in some veins like this. And again, if you add that curl, we've done that before, add that slight sort of curve to it, then it just gives that leaf a bit of form, doesn't it? A bit of shape. And then you'd have them going the other way, going up this way as well, like that. So that's given us a kind of leaf shape there. It'd be quite nice to bring some of those circles that we did here maybe in again, so we can maybe put some more going around here, but I won't do loads because we've sort of done that before, but it'd be quite nice, I think, to follow that shape round with a row of little circles. So I'm going to do another kind of, but I'm going to leave that for now because we have kind of seen how to do that. Can't let go of the camera yet. I'm going to have to try and create another weird camera stand out of bits of household rubbish I can see. Let me just I think I've had this one for about 1.5 years now, and it's been overstretched. I think it's finally giving up the ghost. Right, okay, that's just about okay, I think, in that position. It's slightly at an angle, so apologies. So I'm going to do another leaf shape kind of coming up here. So we'll do the central vein kind of coming up there and down again, like that. And then we're going to put the two sides of the leaf shape in, and they're travelling behind those sort of wobbly stamen that are down there, like that. And then we'll do another curl. Let's do it facing the other way. So you've got a big curl, and then it comes down and follows the outline of that leaf. And then bring that round and follow that outline through. Okay, and then we're going to put the veins on again. So we're going to bring those lines up and behind. Now, I would like to put more of these sort of shapes in around the background and get some more detail into them, but I also don't want us to run out of time and not have looked at the amber stone. So we're going to do the amber stone next, and then I would say there's plenty of scope here to put lots more in. So hopefully we'll get the amber stone basically done, and then we can put a few more curls and things in. We've got sort of like a good basis of showing sort of, I think I'd want to get definitely some couple of pieces in here. So otherwise it's going to look like a sort of figure dancing, leaping in the air and waving their arms up in the air. So I want to put a few more bits in here to kind of blend in and get a better background. But I'm going to try and get my camera into a place where it can focus on the round bit in the middle. Bear with me, I'll have a quick battle with that for a couple of seconds. Go on, you can do it. No, apparently you can't. Sorry about this. Every time I think it's moved somewhere, it then sags backwards and refuses to be in position. I'm going to have to end up doing this one-handed this rate. I'm going to grab some masking tape and use that to anchor it in position. That would have worked in theory, but the tape has now stuck itself to itself. I can't unstick it. Oh, it's a shame you can't see the battle that's happening at this point in time. Right, I've stuck it down. Let's come back up a bit and see if that gives us a nice close-up view of the circle. Let's see if I can get that slightly in more focus. There we go. That's not too bad, is it? I don't know if I can get my hand in between here and the canvas now to draw, but there we go. Right. So when we think about the amber stone, as I was saying, the first thing that we have to think about is it's going to have this sort of slightly cracked appearance inside the stone. So I think to do that, we're going to use a very fine black pen to begin with to kind of isolate, to get these cracks on, and then we're going to work over the top of them, kind of almost ignoring them, and that should hopefully kind of blend the sort of like colours in over them. We've also got to think about though about the white highlight, because we're going to still need to have our big white highlight going across the top surface, and we're going to have a kind of glow happening down on this sort of section here. So I'm going to mark out in pencil where our white highlight's going, and it might be that you want to we want to eventually erase this highlight, because otherwise sometimes having the pencil edge on it can be a bit distracting. So I'm just going to draw in a sort of oh no, the masking tape's given way. Oh, sorry. Just when right, I'm going to have to hold it. It's fine, so bear with me. I'm going to have to just hold the damn thing in place. Right, sorry. So I was just very carefully drawing in the sort of long, it's like a very elongated drop shape, and that's going to show where our very whitest highlight is going to be. And then we're going to have like another one facing it, almost like a little comet, sort of rushing towards each other, and then maybe a sort of circle. So these are going to be our very sort of wet highlights. So then we're going to do our cracks, and I want to use a fairly fine black pen, so 0.1 or 0.05 if you've got it. I'm going to imagine sort of like a sort of slight crazing, like the sort of crackle glaze you get. So remember, when if you hit your highlight, stop and lift your pen up and then put it down again. So it doesn't really matter what shapes you do, because these are obviously cracks and they're very natural. So, but a sort of web of lines going through it like that, and you can put them overlapping each other and like crisscrossing like that maybe. And it would probably work quite well to perhaps vary the pen thickness a little bit as well, so maybe do some in a slightly thicker pen, but that should then it's really hard to do random things. You might find this. It's really hard to make stuff look, when you start thinking, oh, and you get like a rhythm happening. And you think, no, I'm trying to get really random. But so if you try and leave part of the stone sort of uncracked, and then have some that are kind of close together, but that sort of thing, that should do it. That should kind of give you the feeling of, and I think it's already remarkable how it already sort of helps to give it a kind of cracky kind of feel. So then we're going to go into using, I'm going to start off with orange. I'm trying to reach across to my orange pencil while balancing this rotten stand. Okay, right, so we're going to start off with orange first, because remember what we try and do is start with the sort of middle tone first, because then we can go brighter and we can go darker. I want to leave, in the stone last week we had like a sort of quite central gleam, but for this one I'm going to leave I want to leave my palest bit being here at the bottom in a kind of smiley shape. So I'm going to start off just by doing that in orange, just slightly bigger than I would want it in the finished one, so I can see that kind of bit in there hopefully. And then to start off with, just I want to feel light pressure. We're not trying to do lots of colouring at this stage. We're keeping it very light, and we're going to fill in the whole of the stone in our it's a mid-tone orange, and we're not going to put a lot of pressure on it. We're going to keep it very light, because it's just like a sort of foundation layer to kind of start the colouring process. So keep it nice and light and move it in across the stone. So hopefully you're seeing we're getting that sort. We are seeing there is some colour on there, and of course where you've got your white highlights, just colour up to them. And what we'll do after we've coloured all this in is to just erase that pencil, so we keep that line of the highlight. You know, we don't want it to have pencil mark around it, but for now, as it's there, colour up to it, and then that'll help be as a guide. It'll help you get round it and remember where it is, because your lines are obviously operating around that one too. So, but we're just starting to see that very pale orange colouring coming through. go. And then I'm going to have to let go of the camera with my left hand so I can get my rubber out, I think. So I've got all my kind of very pale orange in, so I'm going to just grab a pencil eraser and just take out the pencil outline for around those highlights. And I'm going to keep, hopefully I can just about see the white, and it's not erasing the pencil mark, it's not erasing the coloured pencil. If it does a bit, well, as long as you've got a rough idea, we can sort of sharpen it up again later, so we can still just about see the white marks there. Right, so then I'm going to go in a bit darker with that orange pencil, but I'm going to concentrate on the upper end up here. So I'm going to start off by concentrating round those highlights, quite useful if you need to keep them in your memory. And so now I'm putting a bit more pressure on to get a bit more colour onto the stone, and I'm just following round those highlights first, like that. And then I'm going to spread my colouring to sort of more towards the end, or the top end of the stone is what I'm thinking of. So then just round that circle there, and then I'm going to focus this orange into this sort of middle section, because this is where it's going to be orange. We're going to get much more into brown or very dark brown tones towards this sort of the northern end, I suppose we could say, couldn't we? So if we head towards the equator of our stone, this is going to be definitely a lot more orangey. And the highlights are sitting basically in the sort of orangey bit. And there's a shadow, because what you're seeing is that when you look at the stone in a setting, you're going to find there's a shadow cast by the metal into the stone, because it's blocking the light in one part. So that's why up here is going to be a bit darker. But for the moment, I'm just going to get this section here a bit more orangey. That's right. And sharpen up that highlight so it's a nice sort of long thin line. And I'm going to put a little bit of orangey up in here, just so that it's got, when I put the brown on top of that, which is what we're going to do, you're going to see it helps to give it a slightly orange cast. And then bring that orange close in towards this light section here. We're going to work some yellows into this light section to give it the glow like we had last week. So that's got that sort of like orange zone in. But it's a very intense stone, so we're going to keep on layering these colours up, because we want to get plenty of colour on here. I think it looks slightly darker in my real world than it does for you on the screen. So we should have plenty of orange on there. So there we go. So now I'm going to come in with some red. If you've got a choice, I want you to go for your orangier red. So often in reds you have maybe a pinky one and a sort of a crimson and a scarlet. This is definitely scarlet. I'm just going to grab a slurp of tea quickly. Gosh, that's hot. Right, so I'm going to do definitely scarlet into this. And again, to start with, keep it in this sort of upper section, and until you get the feel of it, start with it light, because you can always press it down a bit more and go a bit darker, but start with it on the light, on not too much pressure to begin with, and start blending the red. If you start blending it round the highlights, and firm up the edges of your highlights each time, and hopefully they will stay nice and sharp and bright and white. But we're getting more of a kind of amber tone. I mean, you can do, obviously any sort of colour stones will work in this kind of way. But for amber, although it's got the red in it, we're going to have to get some brown and some sort of ochre tones in there as well to really capture that kind of resin colour that you get. So we're just working the red around those highlights, and a little bit around the edges. And I think some contrast will be useful to get this to work too. I think we might bring in a couple of other sneaky invisible tones in a minute that will end up creating the effect in the final piece a bit more. So I'm still leaving. I'm going to also, can you see where you've got your black cracking lines? I'm going to just colour on top of those in the red, just a little bit, but that's going to help, because sometimes when you see the cracks you get like a little bit of light refraction around it. So in a couple of them I'm just going to follow them like veins, kind of following through. That's the word I'm kind of thinking of. We call it veins, don't we? Not really cracks, but anyway. And then I'm going to take the red up into the top section as well. Don't have to press massively hard, but just so that, again, that red is kind of, the layering is working all the way through the whole of the stone. That's it. And I want to leave not exactly a reflection, but a tiny bit at the back that's slightly paler than the rest of the back, which will make more sense when we get into the darker colours. But I'm going to leave a little area here showing some of this reddy orange through, because we're going to bring some brown tones into play. And I'm going to take a little bit of red just coming round the southern edge of our stone, just a tiny hint, like a single line kind of coming round, but just so that we're blending all of those shapes through. Okay, so that's sort of some red. Lovely. And then this is when I'm going to say we're going to introduce a little bit of something slightly off-piste, I suppose. But I'm going to get, if you've got a green pencil to hand, I'm going to put a tiny bit of green into some of these areas before I go in with the brown. And the green is going to kind of act as a cooling agent, as it were. And it will help to start darkening it off. So I'm just bringing a little bit of green into the side edge here, because you get a real range of colours in a stone like this. And the more you look at it, the more you see. I said before, it's a great excuse to go and buy yourself some beautiful gemstone jewellery, just because you need to study it for your art. That's what you're doing. So I'm just following the crevice with that. So I'm literally almost like following like a little patchwork piece, just following the line that I've drawn in there, just in that green. It's just starting to add some shadow. And then maybe up in here, I think we can put a little bit of green up in here. This is going to add depth to the shadow, but I'm not going all that top, because I want to leave a little patch of, as I was saying, a little patch of red eventually showing through, just kind of get some more colour refractions happening. So I'm almost doing like a sort of a long banana shape or a curved shape, look, just in there of like that pattern, just to kind of get that sort of slightly different quality in there. So that's just some little tiny green flecks that are going in and round there. And then I'm going to go for a sandy brown to start off with, and then we're going to go into something darker. Oh, why is it? I've got a dark brown. I thought it was. So I've got a sandy brown here. So let's see how that's working. I'm going to start that towards this southern end first. So that's sort of slightly sort of like cooling down the orange in some part of it. And then maybe sort of along here, alongside that green, I can add a little bit of this sandy colour. And in here. So the cracks almost become like quadrants that you can sort of do slightly different treatments to in each one. That's going to really enhance that kind of cracked feel. Okay, and then I think we're going to get, well, let's go for our, maybe some yellow. We're going to do some yellow in here, and then we're going to get some brown in and start like ramping up the colours, because I think we need to go bolder, but we're sort of creeping towards it bit by bit. So then we're going to go yellow into here. So let's start adding some yellow around this light spot. We're going to have a white section here just to get that really strong gleamy quality, but I want to outline it in yellow as if it's a big white mouth. I'm putting on yellow lipstick. That's the sort of deal. So we've got quite a sort of clump of yellow coming around the edge. And there will be some nice reflected colour on the metalwork here. So I'm going to put a little bit of yellow, because that yellow star where it's really catching the light, that's definitely going to be reflecting on my border around there. And then I'm going to bring that yellow back across the orange, and I think there's going to be more orange blending needed, but I'm going to bring into where you've got your sort of veiny sections, your cracks. If you kind of slightly keep the yellow in the middle of those, as if you're creating a slight individual pattern for each one. So just slightly put yellow on, but just keep it slightly to the middle, so you're leaving a margin again around it. So you're doing a centre. I may want to blend some more of that with orange to kind of get that effect. So I'm trying not to migrate my camera hand. And then I put a little bit of yellow into the centre of that, just so that's hopefully we're going to get some real light. Now I think we need to get into the darkness. We need to get some strong kind of brown tones into that to really start adding some drama, and then we'll come back with some extra orange. So you want a nice chocolate brown pencil, and then we're going to come in here and start off on this edge here and go over the green bits, because they're just going to add depth to that brown that you're adding. And if the line disappears completely, that's okay up here, but hopefully that black pen will show through enough. And then I'm going to come up, so certainly round this top edge, and again take it round first of all in a really thin line, because I want to leave a tiny bit of red showing through at the top. But let's start off by getting a line around this back edge of the stone, and it's going to come round and take it round around the stone like that, and we're starting to get some shadow. And I'm going to come quite far round into the light section. I'm going to follow round that, so it's giving that lick of shadow, starting to come all the way round, and then I'm going to bring it round this side as well, just right up to your drawn black line. So it's kind of coming up, and then just before we hit this sort of yellow, our very pale patch, it's going to disappear, but it's gone all the way round. And then I come back up here, and I'm going to try and colour up to the black lines, just so that we're keeping them visible. Let's colour in certainly behind that hard, sorry, I'm still migrating my hand. It's really hard to sort of, it's like trying to pat your head and rub your tummy or whichever around you do it, you know. So let's just come in darker into that sort of section there. So that's getting that a bit more darker. And I'm going to put a little bit of, not so heavy, but I'm still going to put some brown on this side of the highlight too. This side where I'm using the brown, I'm blending it much more. It's much more the soft kind of round motion. So it is putting the brown in, but not as quite as heavily as you've got it on that side. So following that shape round through there, and then this side much darker, following that wet highlight. I'm going to join up to that green bit that I've got in there and come over the top of that. There we go, working over all that green bit. That bit there, that's going to go dark. So I've joined it up to that outline. But you see, I'm going to make this much smaller, this patch here, but this is a bit, I'm going to be slightly lighter on there. Definitely going to be darker here though, come into that top edge. And this is where I can go really, really dark, sort of just into there. And I'm going to come up to the back of this highlight here. So coming into this section here, just trying to keep that highlight looking fat and round. We have got white pen, so if you do completely sort of change the shape and it all gets too small, we can go in and use a bit of white pen to sort of tidy that up a bit and make it a bit brighter if that happens. And then this back section here, let's make that a little bit smaller. So heavy shading, but then just for this last bit, still brown shading, but just lighten it up. Just don't put quite as much pressure on it, so you can blend that section in. And we're going to put some more orange over the top of everything, and we're going to keep building up our layers. But you can see you can just put a little bit of stronger colour, just leave a little bit of that colour showing through there, so it's got a bit more shadow to it. And then I'm seeing I want to put a bit sort of shadow in here, and maybe spread this around a little bit more this way. And I think this little patch here, that can get a little bit darker as well. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit more brown shading onto that. Okay, so I think I need to try and get this sort of orange bit in the middle. I need to get some orange power. So I'm going to use my brown pencil to follow some of the veins, again, like I did with the red one, but just to sort of make them a little bit chunkier and pad them out a bit. So they've got a bit more texture. A bit more texture, do I mean texture? A bit more presence, really, I think is what I mean, rather than texture. Make them a little bit more obvious, sort of coming through there. And maybe a couple more down here just make them a little bit fatter and a bit more of using the kind of dark brown kind of colouring. I think this one here could do with a bit more sort of softness. I think that's working quite well, making them look quite sort of nice and cracky, yes. And then I'm going to deepen that down. I might have to come in with some even darker, like maybe even a black pencil around the edge, I think, to get that really sort of strong contrast. But I want to get some more orange into this orange section. It's not orangey enough. It still looks a bit pastel on mine, and I definitely want to get some more intensity of colour. So I'm going to start with some more orange now, going back in, filling in those sort of sections and taking it over the brown section and then back out into the middle section. So again, all the layering helps to build up the kind of waxiness of the surface, which helps to give again that sort of feeling of a smooth surface that you want to run your finger over. And it's also helping to sort of blend the yellows that we put in before are now blending into, or should hopefully be blending into, the orange we're putting on top, and again helping to give it this nice slick surface. So as we come into here, we're getting more of the, it's sort of like as if when you put one colour on top of another, it's like you put the first layer on, which like here was the yellow, and then when you come back with the orange, you almost kind of like wake up the yellow layer a bit more, and it starts to really interact with your orange pencil, and it sort of gives you a really sort of like brighter and more dramatic sort of surface. You can see the difference between those two areas, where this one's not had a second coat of orange and this one has. It sort of really helps to sort of, as I say, sort of work your surface and blend those sort of two bits together. And if we come out into this sort of yellow zone here, I just want to take it right, I want to leave a little bit of yellow. I'm going to probably come back with some yellow and go back over my orange to again intensify it. But I'm just going to blend that towards here and around here, leaving that sort of, we have to decide whether we need to leave, well, I think we'll put a bit more yellow in and reduce the white a little bit, but I'm going to get some orange into these sort of corner posts and up into here, and hopefully we're getting something much more lively now, much stronger and bolder with the sort of deliciousness. And then I'm going to come into this section here, so I've got extra orange on everything, and then I'm going to come back with some yellow. So even on this little highlight round the back here, let's get some orange into that where we've left it sort of slightly paler, so we're getting a bit more life, and you get the idea of sort of nice reflected colours happening. Again, talking reflected colours, I think we're definitely going to be seeing a little bit of orange reflecting on the metal of some of these. If we're saying they're metal, you know, we can sort of see that reflecting, like a little hint of light spilling out onto there. Okay, so now we're going to get the yellow. Hopefully this is getting, we take a sort of little zoom back, we should hopefully be seeing this as a much more sort of liquid and kind of gleamy surface than when we started, obviously. So I'm going to grab my yellow again, and I want to ramp it up and blend it in over. So I'm going to put a bit more into the white section and bring it round the back of the white section of the southern end of our stone, 6 o'clock position, depending on how you find things easy to see, you know, how you visualize things. And then I'm going to come back on top of my orange again here, so I'm again working back over with yellow into the orange. So I've got orange, and then I've got yellow, and I've got orange and yellow, and it's the layering that really helps you build up this sort of lovely surface and gives it that glorious kind of intensity. That's it. And okay, so that's got a really nice gleam working in there, I think, by putting that yellow in. I think I want to get a bit more strength up into this section here, and that's going to need red pencil. So we go back to our scarlet, the scarlet pencil. That sounds like a villain, doesn't it? A Scarlet Pimpernel is what I'm thinking of. But so I'm just going to come in around those highlights on top of my orange, and I'm just now adding scarlet. And what a glorious colour it is. And I don't know if you've ever thought about the history of colours, but each colour that we think of often has a surprising history all of its own. And I wish I knew the one for scarlet, and I don't at all. But it has, of course, become emblematic with all sorts of, to be a scarlet woman was to be outrageous and, probably having more fun than everyone else, which is why they didn't like you, I would imagine. And there's a great debate about whether the word orange, meaning the fruit, came before orange, meaning the colour. And I looked into it, and I have discovered that the word orange, meaning the fruit, was definitely first. And in fact, we had no word for orange until about 1400. So you would refer to red and reddy yellow. You wouldn't have said orange at all. And it was only when oranges started being imported from Persia and the Middle East, and the Persian word for orange is jaron or something along those lines, and it became sort of linked with the colour and then became the name for the colour, and it was sort of anglicised into orange and orange in French and things like that. But I thought that was quite interesting. So you wouldn't have had an orange pencil in 1350. You'd have had a reddy yellow pencil, please. But we sort of always think that because we've always seen colours, that all the names for colours have always been with us, but they really haven't been. And the vast majority of them were invented by the Victorians, as in the colour names. So there we go. So I'm just going to I do like a bit of social history from time to time. I'm just working my red now around the crevices too, or the cracks, just not all the way down, but just some of the ones up here, imagining that those sort of little shards are making the intensity of colour kind of shatter through them, or sort of like transmit them through the stone. That's what I'm thinking of, transmit. And I can bring all of that round there, and I think I'm going to just put a tiny bit more red around that bottom edge and up through here. And I think with those veins, I think I'd like to give them a kind of slightly smokier kind of feel. And so it might be the case to go and find my black pencil, but I'm going to have to release my camera for a second. Let's see if it's not in a too hopeless position. No, it's still sagging. Oh, you swine, honestly. So I'm just going to grab a black pencil just because I want to add a slightly smoky quality to the lines, and put a little bit of black pencil into the very deep shadows. Oh, look, it's sitting there quite nicely. So you can have a quick look at where I am with that. And I'm going to grab a black coloured pencil, so just bear with me 1 second while I unplug my ears. Right, there we go. So I'm going to tempt fate and see if the camera will stay put. This is when I'm just going to lean straight over and knock it, and it's going to disappear, going to fall over completely. So I'm just going to give my black pencil a quick sharpen. As it's obviously very well used. Here we go. So I'm just going to use the black pencil to go over some of the little veins, because I just want to make them spread out slightly so they're not quite all as thin. However, you don't want to do every single one. You can just do part of them, so you get a slight variation in thickness. So that just gives you a slightly more kind of natural feel, because see, I've just made that there slightly thicker and that bit there slightly thicker. And I'll do a couple more, so not the whole thing, but just part of it, and that will make that look slightly more, it gives it just that 3D quality, because you have to remember that these cracks and things, they aren't just flat lines, they're actually sort of going through the whole stone, because they're not really cracks at all, they're ribbons of prehistoric forest, like tiny fragments of prehistoric foliage trapped in the stone, which I just love things like that. I just think it's so amazing that that's where it's from. It's incredible. I had a friend over the weekend, and we were just talking about, he's a scout leader, he's talking about things he sort of tells the scouts to really make them think, and he did something with me which I thought was amazing, and he said, did you know that sharks existed before there were trees in the world? They haven't changed in all of that time. So before there were trees, there were sharks, and they're still quite happy with the way they look, thank you very much, and haven't found the need to evolve since. So that's longevity in design for you. Right, so I've just put a few little bits. I'm just going to put a little bit of this shading with the black pencil, I'm not going to go really hard. I'm just going to work a little bit of blacker pencil just in this sort of top edge around the back of the stone. Yes, Sarah says that's evolution for you. Yes, it's very clever mechanism of how things work. But I'm thinking of it because, you know, the sharks might have been, you know, they would have been here before amber could have been created because there would have been no trees. But I imagine that then we were laughing about, imagine the shark was the first one to bump into a tree and go, what was that? Where did that come from? I don't think it probably worked like that. But I'm just adding a little bit of blackness around that top edge just to really intensify that shadow. And hopefully you're getting a similar kind of feel with your stones and enjoying the look and feel of it. I'm quite happy with that. I'm thinking that's starting to look really, I think just adding that little bit of thick pencil on some of the lines, that's really changed it for me. I think that's really helped to kind of give it that realistic feel. So that's very pleasing. I'm going to add a tiny bit of, then again, I'm shading around the highlights. I'm not pressing hard. I'm doing very light black pencil work just along the back of that highlight, which, so you know, it's very subtle. Don't go in really hard. Don't go in with lots of pressure and just like scrub into it. You don't want it to just become like a black stripe. You want it to blend into your brown shade that you've got up there. But I think for now I'm quite happy with how that's looking. I'm not going to do a huge amount more on that. I might come back and fill with it later, but I think for now I'd like to get, in our last 20 minutes, I'd like to think about a bit more about the surroundings so we don't get that completely out of whack. So I'm going to go back for my 0.1 pen, as it's sticking there, its lid off because I couldn't put the lid back on as I had both hands full. And I think we'll have a look at maybe the flower shape around here. So we've got this nice sort of half moon shape in here, so we can get some detail into that. So I think maybe just sort of filling it up with some circle shapes, just so they are filling up that centre, and then we can go back and put something smaller inside those as well. And remember, it's overlapping, so where the circles hit the edge of that jewel, let them just disappear off underneath it. And then you can do anything you want inside them, but you know, I think we want to get some texture in there, so we've got some line work, so some little spirals maybe. And I'm just packing a really tight spiral with a fine pen, and it starts to have quite a nice kind of etched quality around the stone. So just working those around. And also, I say it every week, but you know, the more black line you put on, the darker you're going to make something, because it's just more pen and less white paper. So if you want to make something darker, add more black lines in some kind of way. So that sort of made that bit come quite sort of subtly together. And then I think we want to get a bit of shape into these petals. So just some lines coming up and let them fade out, really, just sort of bring almost like the little veins and the folds that you get into the petals, just coming up from there. And like that, very simple, but just slightly follow the shape of the petal that you've got and let your pen almost just sort of slightly go into a flick at the end, and that will bring a subtlety into that line, and it just really helps to give it that kind of light petal-like kind of feel. I said I want to get something else happening a bit under here, I think, otherwise it's going to look too much like, I said, sort of like a little person leaping in the air. So I think for simple's sake, we'll just put in like another frond that's sticking out from there, see how that works. So I've put the main line in with the black pen, the brush pen, going to a 0.5 pen here, and I just want to bring those frondy petals off here in the same way that I did, and eventually we can go and get all of these detailed in. Think about the layers that you've got and the way they're going to overlap, and we might want to put like very simple, but just put a line going up with a dot at the end, and that starts to help looking like a sort of leaf detailing. So you can either do a line to a dot or do a dot and draw a line down, whichever you prefer. I find both will work, to be honest, so there isn't really a right or wrong on that one. But again, very simple treatment, but it really just helps to bring those leaves to life. They look so different once you've added that in. They start to have a real, much more personality than just the plain sort of bumpy shape. But we'll just move, so dot and line we go. And obviously you can do that in all of these fronds, but I'm not going to do all of them now because I don't want to get too bogged down in that. And so then we could add some half moon shapes as if there were kind of structures going on underneath. And you can just do almost like a rainbow, and then we can put in some stripes on some of these to give them some form. So again, remember how if we use our like rows of brackets or curly shapes all curling the same way, that's immediately made that edge look like it's sitting up and it's not just a flat kind of edge. Let's do one of these leaf shapes that we've got up here. Let's get one of them down here as well, because they're quite nice to curl round, I think. So we do a central vein first and then bring the leaf up to meet it like that. So you've got that kind of shape coming around, and then we had the sort of curly shape coming round the top. It can tuck under if anything's in the way, and then just follow that edge round, and then with this side bring it round like that, and that's given us another kind of leaf shape happening under there. And we're going to put some veins in again, and this time they're kind of coming down because they always travel towards the point of the leaf. So the ones at the top were going up and these ones are going down. And if you just let them get narrower and narrower as you get to the end, that helps to sort of underline that shape that we've got going on. And again, the slight curve just helps to give it a bit of form. As you get closer towards the end, they just disappear down into sort of fineness. Is it fineness? Yes, disappearing into fineness. That sounds like a nice evening. And then I'm going to add some sort of sprays. Got a very sort of simple idea, but if you just bring some lines and follow them out through, and then sort of branch them off into lines like that, and it just gives a kind of nice feathery kind of feel. And then once you've got the ends, a bit like you do with these dots and lines, you can break them up again, and then dots and lines kind of coming down into little clusters like that, and they sort of have that feeling of the sort of what's that stuff, I don't know if it's the right name for it. Mum used to call it kale parsley, but that sort of thing. And in this, it's when it dries out in the winter, you get these sort of like dried, sort of rather dramatic, sort of elegant plants sort of growing around. But it's just a very simple abstract kind of idea to get some sort of light shapes kind of coming, and they can grow all the way around just to fill in some of the gaps in and around. How are we doing? Okay, right. So then of course we want to think a little bit about some of the shading that we want in here. We've covered quite a few, but you can obviously choose any colour that you want. You could go into sort of shades of green to be a big contrast to your amber stone. You could stick to silvers. You could go for gold for a full-on kind of glorious czarist kind of amber and gold combination, depending on how decadent you're feeling. But I think just think again about where things are layering over each other and where you might want to add a little bit of shadow to help that. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to stick to just using the black pencil, but very lightly to put shadow in. So I'm just going to add these bits in here, and I'm going to do a little bit of shadow. But you have to decide how you want to take this and whether you want to add in more colour or keep the drama of having the bright stone in the middle. But yeah, so if you've got our sort of layers and things that are happening there, then where's my black pencil? I've just bigged you up, black pencil. Where have you gone? Oh, here you are, right. He was hiding next to a dark blue pencil, which was quite confusing. So it's just where you've got some areas of overlap, we can just very gently, and particularly if you're using black pencil, keep your shading hand really light. There should be no cramping of hands doing this. It should be very light and sort of delicate, round and round with a nice sharp point. Just a little bit of shadow, perhaps as they come down to that sort of central vein. Just follow a little bit. Whereas you've got these two here, you might have a slight overlap, and that overlap will cast a bit of shadow. So I'm just softening that line down towards that sort of dark margin or the vein running down the centre. We've got, so again, it's just quite subtle, because you can always go and make it stronger if you think you want to. You know, you can do it a bit at this level, and then if you decide you want to go blacker, then you absolutely can. But it's just really hard to go lighter once you've gone darker. So we can just, and again, look, because I'm coming down here, there's an overlap happening here, so I can just get a little bit of that shadow in. And I like to sort of slightly shade it towards the vein in the middle, where if it's black, it just sort of blends into that quite nicely. So here we go. So that's starting to get some texture and some shading into that one. Again, round your sort of big stone here, I'm using a black pencil. You could use this with pen just as well. And I'm just coming in to outline those shapes there, so we get some depth into that, and it starts looking like a space underneath. And that again will help to make this stand out, these shapes, and it will also help to make that sort of gemstone setting in the middle pop a bit too. So again, just using soft pencil to come around here, and that means that when you get into a space that's slightly bigger, you can just very lightly turn your shading from black into grey, and that gives you the ability to kind of gradiate that out towards the outside, so you keep the darkest shadow towards the edge of the metal, and if you've got any sort of space, and you can really keep it light and just add you get that slight sort of sense of the shadow changing. Then we've got these sort of lovely curlicue shapes here. They're overlapping quite a lot, so where they're overlapping we can do shading here. So you shade the things that are going on behind. So just very light, I'm going to just sit a very light black pencil just where that's coming up and under, like that. And just, I can always come back and make it heavier, but I'm just going to keep that quite light here. And then like where this petal is going under here, I'm going to just put a tiny bit of light shadow, very delicate. Like I said, if your wrist is hurting, that means you're doing it way too heavily, and you need to relax your hand a bit and just let it very, very gently touch the paper, because you can always go darker. That's it. And then like where you've got this sort of smooth leaf here, you could do it in favourite stripes along here. You could put a white highlight running up the middle, but I think sometimes it works just as well just to put a little bit of shading as it folds in towards that vein, and that just helps give them that, it just helps enhancing the kind of form that you've started by using those curved lines. And again, this petal's overlapping here, so we want to put a bit of shadow, cast shadow on it, coming round. And you've got all the little baubles here, so I would put a little bit of shadow like on the bottom half of them. So on the bottom edge, looks like a little smiley line, and it's just underneath where you've got a bit of orange reflected colour happening, but then that just gives a little bit of shadow. It's almost just like drawing a little smile on each one. So you've got a tiny bit of shadow like that. But the trick is that when you get to the ones on the top, instead of doing a smiley face, you're going to do a slightly sad face, because they're going to be slightly more shadowed. No, I think it would be all right. I was thinking about putting shadow on top. Actually, I think you would put underneath, so ignore that. I think you would still put the shadow underneath, because the light still will be coming down. It's just that the light coming down here is going through the stone, so it's slightly orangey because it's hitting the stone first and spreading that colour down. And so I'm still going to add a bit of shadow. I think it's more that as you come round the side, you've got to think about, you can decide to slightly move that point so it's slightly coming down more to the side each time, because as it comes down, the light is still going to be coming down from straight above, so you're going to slide your shadow kind of round to the, so that here you're doing it kind of like you're not touching the rim with it, it's still underneath of the circle, if that makes sense. So that's not getting too confusing. So that's just coming down, and that little bit of shadow just starts to make those shapes come to life a bit more. Now, of course, if you want to change your colour here, you can certainly do that. You could be doing this in dark greens, you could be doing it in blues, you could be doing it in silvers. You can just lay down some dark shadow first in the black. If you keep it really light, you can go back over the top with another colour. So you could start off by just putting in your shadowed areas in black pencil, but black pencil done very lightly, and then you might come back later and decide to work over the top in another colour. And if you just get your colour where you've got black pencil, it'll just tone your colour pencil right down, and it becomes a shadowed version of your colour. So if you're going to do all these in silvery blue or something, that would work. So you can just very carefully spend some time deciding where you want your bits of shadow, and then you can bring in some colour later if you want to. So it's not a one-way street. So we're bringing these sort of, with these nice sort of curly shapes, again, think about where the light would be hitting them. They're probably going to have some shade, a bit like the baubles, the little balls. They're going to have like a little smiley of shadow kind of just coming in that bottom half. And if you don't go quite up to line, so you leave a tiny bit of white paper between your outline and your bit of shadow, that somehow looks more convincing than if you colour it all completely black. I don't know why. I think it's because you probably get like a bit of reflected light coming from underneath. So on this one, you'd be colouring, again, draw like a sort of smiley face on like that, like Mr. Happy, and then shade in above that line and don't go below it. And you just get that little half moon of shadow then. And you can go a little bit darker, again, if you want to, down the bottom with a bit more pressure. But just leaving that little bit of white underneath, it just seems to make it more kind of like realistic. And I like the combination of having a completely fanciful object and yet making the shading look really convincing, because it looks like it's a real thing and yet it can't possibly exist. So again, under here, I'm just going to put a little bit of shadow onto that shape that I've drawn and bring. So as my pencil comes down on this bit, it's going to get softer and softer. Very, very delicate, hardly touching the paper tool, just whispering it over the surface. And then it blends almost all the way to white. And underneath here, that can get darker. That's where you put the pressure on, just to darken up that shadow. And there we go. You should see that's given a lovely gradation of colour coming under there. And I think with that, we will have to leave our amber, our Tsarist duel for this week. But of course, there's plenty for you to continue with. And if you want to, yes, umbellifers, cow parsley. Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. I was right. If you want to continue adding more structure to your outside areas and build that up even further, that's, it's got plenty of scope to do that. But for now, that's where we're going to leave it for tonight.